Hello, welcome to the April 3rd, 2026 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you've not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize my ability to answer all the questions in a real-time manner may soon not be possible with the number of questions coming in, but we will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. When asking questions, we'll go through all the questions chronologically. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, it's always helpful if you could specify which version of Cubase that you are running. So if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. Also, if you, which version number, so if it's version 13, 14, 15. Also, which operating system, that information is helpful. We should have an index of all of the topics that are discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends with timestamps, so you could quickly navigate to particular topics. If you wanted to search for topics been covered in other previous live streams, we have over 500 live streams. You can go to cubaseindex.com, and there you could search through and navigate through more than 44,000 questions. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that site. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees. They do it to make it a better community experience. So we want to express our thanks to them. And we'll give extra gratitude to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work with Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I'm the host today. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States, in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you live. With that, and even if you're watching it afterward, feel free to introduce yourself in comments. It's always interesting to see where people are from. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and begin. All right, so the first question from Babasala says, hi Greg, how do you create different MixConsole views? I want to have one that includes the meter bridge and one that only has faders, sends, and inserts. Tried using configuration, but the meters keep appearing in all configs. Once I add them to one config, don't quite get the difference between configs, snapshots, and MixConsole 1, 2, 3, Cubase 15 Pro, Mac Sequoia. All right, let's take a quick look and see if the meter bridge. So we will come over here. So I think when we are doing the MixConsole configurations, this will allow us to. So let's say I just want, I want to see only, and let's use your example here. So faders, sends, inserts. All right, so we'll have our faders. So I'm going to just kind of right click here and we'll go to setup sections. So I want to come over here. So say inserts, send, and let's say our faders. Okay, so I'll open up these. So let's go ahead and save this as I'm going to add a configuration. So we'll say give it a name, and let's say if I want to add my channel EQ, I'll come over here to setup sections. So I think generally the configuration is going to be, and we could also choose to hide particular channels when we're here. So now if we wanted to add, let's say our EQ section, so let's say we want to do our EQ curve at the top, and let's say our EQ here. All right, so then we'll say we'll have this closed. Let's save this as a configuration. All right, and let me just All right, so now we can just simply go back and forth between those. We see all of our channels here and the visibility. And let's come over here. Let's when we add the EQ section, those channels will be hidden. All right, now let's say if we come over here, just find the okay, so say if we now come over here, and so the window layout, the meter bridge may be kind of in all of the different views. That may be more of a global thing. So let's say so I think that the meter bridge would be kind of global and would be kind of incorporated into, so we could think of the channel configurations here as being kind of like what actual components are that we see kind of in the sections, but this may be kind of more global. Now, one other thing that we can do is, let's see if we go to MixConsole 2. So we could, just come over here and switch between MixConsole 1. So we could have different mix consoles, and these mix consoles could be for different types of tracks. So I only want to see virtual instruments in this mixer, only want to see audio. And it looks like when we have, we could switch between 4 different mixers. So I come here, I could have MixConsole 1. So within the MixConsole 1, the meter bridge isn't going to be stored as part of the configuration. The configuration is going to be what elements we have in the racks and channel visibility. But if we wanted to come over to like our different mix consoles, we have 4. Then if I wanted to have kind of different global functions like the meter bridge, I could pick and choose to enable or disable different global functions for the mix console by utilizing different mix console. And you ask kind of what's the purpose of snapshots. So snapshots will allow you to kind of take pictures of your different components. So over here, we can say, okay, I want to take a picture of this, and we could take a snapshot of the particular mixer, and then recall that particular snapshot. So if you do a mix and then before you get into automation, say, okay, now I want to totally tear down the mix entirely and build up a different mix and then be able to compare. So we could think a snapshot is like taking a picture, like a static view of the mix console. So it's used primarily more for doing like comparative mixing. It's like, how does this sound versus this? That's when snapshots would be used. And we could think of configurations as being more for what actual components I want to see in the mixer with channels. And then again, we could use, if you have global functions like the meters that you want to deactivate, use one of the 4 different mix consoles. And then you could choose to have different global mix console settings. So let me know if that makes sense. And I'll just come back over here. Let me set up sections. And now we can see everything in the mix console there. Okay, as we see Stefan joining from Sweden, great to have you on. We see Vince as Fly V from Winnipeg. Hope you're settling into your new apartment. Great to see you on the Zoom on Friday. We see Peter checking in from Montreal. And we have Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven, and Mark Raven's dog Stella and other pets nearby. All right, we have Dennis checking in from Stayner, Ontario. Thanks for being part of the community today. Always wonderful to see Jazz Dude. All right, so we see from Da76Wa, Hi Greg, any update yesterday? I'm not seeing group editing of folders when I create a folder group, or am I missing something? All right, so let's say one of the new things, there was an update that was just released on Wednesday, 15.02. It's free for all Cubase 15 users. And one of the things it has is kind of folders with group channel. So when we come over here, let's say I have this into a folder, and we had 3 questions on this on Tuesday's live stream, we could now say enable a group channel. So it could be depending on the height, that when you do this, you may have to adjust the height, but we will see the group editing as well as the phase coherent audio warp functions there. If for some reason you extend the height further and still don't see it, you can probably, I think if you right click, and let's go to your track control settings, and you just want to make sure that we have group editing. When you get to the folder, that group editing is, in the visible controls as opposed to the hidden controls, but they're still directly there. So let me know if that helps. All right, so we have VS Terra Nova joining from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. It's great to see you on again. All right, Peter was just asking, was there a Zoom meetup on the 31st this past Tuesday? Yes, there was. So sorry we missed you. There's my first live stream back after vacation. I think I'm still technically on vacation, but still doing live streams. All right. All right, so we see Jan from Cubase Index saying hi to everyone. Thanks for being on, Jan. All right, so we see Peter just says, I couldn't make it to the live stream, looked everywhere for the Zoom ID and password, tried Discord as well, but could not locate that info. So generally what I do, because I know sometimes I put it in the comments field for the live, but sometimes the comments field doesn't come up. So at the very beginning of the live stream, what I'll try to do, and I did it this past time just for everyone's information, is I just showed like as part of the live stream where you could see the Zoom ID and password. So if you miss it, and it's kind of like where the comments aren't compiled when you watch the video yet, the commentary, I will try to always put like the Zoom, like open up the Zoom invite window so that you could see the meeting ID and passcode in the future. So just keep that in mind for next time, Peter, but sorry that we missed you, and we look forward to seeing you at the end of April. All right, we see Benny joining. We see Soren, who has a new release coming out. Congratulations on that, Soren. All right, so we see Digital Artist Videographer says new to Cubase, but liking what I'm seeing so far. Thanks for being part of the community. Great to see Brian DeBear sending greetings from Yuma, Arizona. Great to see you on the Zoom. All right, John Barry joining from the sunny English Riviera. Good to see you on the Zoom as well. All right, Bratman Studios wishing everyone is in Whittier, California. It's warm, 84 degrees, getting ready for the weekend. I hope everyone has a great Easter if you're celebrating Easter. And a happy Friday. Or happy Good Friday. All right, so we see Troll St. John says, hi Greg, hi chat, the new update is awesome. Yeah, Steinberg did a lot of great work with that. So, and also, if you're not familiar, there is a sale going on through, I think, April 28th. I could be mistaken. We're 30% off of Cubase and updates. So if you haven't updated yet, it's a great time to be able to do that. All right, we have Paul Elijah joining from Bungoma, Kenya. Thanks for being online today and joining us, being part of the community. Hope to see you on more future live streams. All right, and we have Non-Delusional watching from Newport, Rhode Island. My mother-in-law grew up there. All right, so Vince just asking, I can't seem to see my play and stop button tray on my monitor. Is there a way set Cubase to fit it? So one of the things that you do, like, let's say if, all right, so sometimes what could happen is, like, if we go, let me just kind of resize this a little bit. So if for some reason, what I would do if you're not seeing kind of like the bottom area, so one is just to come over here and make sure that you have kind of the bottom zone. And when you click here, you could also just make sure that the transport bar is checked. So when you go to the very far right window, you'll see like this little setup window, and then you could just say, okay, let's go to the transport bar, make sure that that is enabled there. If for some reason you grab this and the screen was a little like here, I could adjust and move kind of the screen and maybe extend the screen so that the transport is off the screen. So maybe kind of adjust the window size inward to make it smaller, and then kind of put it in the center, and then click full screen, and then you should see all the available contents in case this screen got moved down and the transport is off the visible screen area. So try going on your Windows or Mac OS just to kind of take it out of full screen and resize, and then full screen again, and then you should probably see the transport there. All right, so we see John Barry has gotten the JP8880 plugin is mentioned by Bratman Studio, by Rick. It says loads of original presets too. Yes, it's free of charge. Thanks for sharing that, Rick. All right, great to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. All right, so we have Mohammed Salah. Says Mohammed Salah from Iraq. He used Cubase 15 Pro, Mac OS Tahoe. I have a little problem. All right, hopefully we'll. Says there's a problem in Cubase 15 Pro and List Editor. When I add text inside it, it shows me articulations in Cubase 14 Pro. In Cubase 14 Pro, everything worked perfect. Yes, I noticed that too. So I didn't get a chance to report it yet. I was just kind of, I'm not sure if you sent an email to me. Someone else had sent an email if it wasn't you. But when we come over here and we go to add, let's say, a MIDI track, and we go to our list editor, that when we choose text, that it just kind of, and we go to insert an event, that it's kind of showing as articulation. So I don't know if there's a workaround for that. I did notice that if I had notes, so I'm not sure if you're doing text for standard MIDI files or text for lyrics, but if I come here and let's say I have an event, and let me just put in some. So if I just put in like some notes here, and if I go into the score editor, we put lyrics in. And when we look at this in the list editor, that we see kind of the lyrics that we entered in are showing as lyric, but when I do that as text, so I will bring that to the attention of the team. So sorry that the behavior has changed with that. All right, Emmanuel Maureen are just saying hello from Quebec City, Canada. I'm on holiday. I can attempt a live Yahoo, maybe a live YouTube here. All right, so we have MG Lax checking in from Bedminster, New Jersey. Thanks for joining us today. See Brian sending well wishes for Jazz Dude who had kind of the flu, so we hope you're feeling better and getting over it. All right, so we see MG Lax says, can I ask what the color palette is, or is there a theme? The slight see-through colors look nice. So I think this is like all of the settings I have here are default. So if I come over to like your preferences or settings, so preferences on Windows, settings on Mac OS, and if you just come over here, I think that pretty much, like if you go into the general colors for user interface, I think everything I'm doing is default settings for this. So I think by default that it will, this is how your Cubase would work. I try to generally work with default settings so that it is the same as what most people are seeing on their system. All right, so we see from DAW76WA says the new folder group invisibility does not appear to have the ability to have left, center, or right. Will this be changed in future updates? Let's take a look. I'll just do new project here. Okay, so let's say, just change the setting here. Okay, so I'm going to move these selected to folder group channel. So we'll have folder 1, let's say. I'll do the same here. All right, so we look at our MixConsole, and we'll get to kind of visibility and zones. Yeah, so it looks like it might be fixed, and I think I can see kind of some of the logic of it, because now we can just expand and collapse the particular folder here. So it might be fixed because of the ability to, collapse and expand each of the folder groups right from here. But I'll bring that to their attention and see if there's any plans of adjusting that. All right, so we see from Under God K, what would you think is the most creative, easy to chop a drum break hip hop producer here? All right, so I think we showed this a little bit on the last live stream. So I would do it probably in Groove Agent. So let's say, okay, so let's say I have a drum loop there. So if I was doing it, I would probably, let me just start here, fresh. Okay, I would just drag and drop the loop right into Groove Agent. And then from Groove Agent, we could go to the Slice tab. At this point, each of the slices is automatically broken. I could now this will automatically create a pattern pad, like a player. So when I do this, this will play that particular pattern. This pattern can be dragged to the project window. So now what we have is MIDI notes that are replicating that particular pattern. So when you say, okay, we're going to come right over here, let's look at, but now let's say if I want to duplicate this a couple times, I could just say, okay, I want to take this particular pattern and I want to just kind of use my left and right arrows. I'll make this just a little taller so we can see it easier. So, and just kind of randomly. So now if I wanted to get like a variation on that, if I wanted to get like, you know, even just reverse the particular notes, I could take that pattern. And if we go to MIDI, I could get to my functions menu and say, let's reverse those notes. Let's do some other variations. So if I'm here, let's go in my Groove Agent, we could say the notes are going to be from C1 through D#2. So I'll go to my MIDI logical editor. And say we want to take notes that are equal here. So we're going to say we want to transform notes and we want to select our subtype. And we'll say set to relative random values, or set to random values between, let's say, C1 and D#2. So now I could just, let's take these three patterns here, and when I just come right over here, and you can save that as a preset if you want, I could just totally randomize the sounds. So we could have kind of our original drum loop, then one that I kind of randomized manually, one that I've reversed, and now three that it will be completely random. And then we could go back to our original drum loop there. Now, of course, any of these you could freely play as well. So if you just come to the Groove Agent track, and even if you wanted to come over and if you want to get like very creative with it, you could do, different MIDI effects. So we can say, okay, on this snare, I want to come over to my MIDI effects, and I want this to do like maybe a rudiment or a MIDI delay. So let's say every time it plays the D1, that it's going to just trigger like a 30-second note delay. So you could set up different pads to have effects or flams and rudiments. So all sorts of creative stuff that you could do, kind of slicing and dicing loops using Groove Agent for hip hop stuff. So it's a favorite of many hip hop producers. So let me know if that's if that makes sense for your workflow. All right, so Lunrick asks, hi Greg, I just upgraded from Cubase 14 to Cubase 15. When creating a new project in Cubase 15, I only have the option to create empty. Do I need to create my project folder beforehand? So when you go to the hub here, it's slightly different. But let's say when we choose create empty, at this point, it's automatically going to prompt you for the file location. So it should be when you create empty here. So previous ones, it started off, I think, in 10 and earlier, where it would put it into your documents folder. Then people weren't necessarily aware of that. And then in 11, you had the option to prompt you for the file location, which is turned into the default behavior. And now with 15, just to make it easier, we could just come right over here, and when you create empty, it's automatically going to prompt you for the project folder location, so that you define the project folder so you know where all the particular files will be. All right, so we see Jan giving kudos to Jazz Dude for his Cubase Nation Discord. All right, Tim Weinheimer says, what should I do in my project when I have finished my project? So if I'm using a third-party plugin, so if I open in the future so I don't lose a track render in place or convert it to audio or freeze track. So, if you always want to make sure that, that track will sound and play back, freezing in place or rendering the file or exporting, doing a batch export would all work. And the concept here is, we can say, okay, I have this particular file. Let's say I have, particular samples in Groove Agent that someone brought over. They're going to leave with that person's drive when they leave my studio. If I come over here and, choose to freeze the track or render in place, so either way, so I can say, okay, let's get my render settings, and I'll say render, and now here I have the audio file that's automatically rendered right here. So as we listen to it, this way, if that plugin or those samples aren't going to be present maybe 10 years from now, that audio file can be rendered. It's really the same concept. So if you do a render in place, you have the original MIDI data that's generally muted right above it. So if you needed to edit it, if you have a file, and this would automatically be, when you save the project folder, the rendered file is automatically in there. If it's rendered, and if you do a freeze tracks, you can just simply, you would see the event, but it's not going to be editable, but it would basically, you would see the event and the audio would play back. So in that frozen file, the audio file that is created during the freeze process will automatically be in the project folder as well. So that was probably first generation. This is probably second generation, and probably third generation is just to do like a batch export and render all the files. I think all of them will get you the same result of being able to play back and have that sound of the plugin in the project, regardless of that plugin is there. So either freeze, render in place, or batch audio export will do the trick for you. So kind of the same solution, just 3 different approaches. All right, so we have Nico Thomason joining from Finland. Thanks for joining us. Sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right. All right, so we have Thomas joining from Germany, just upgraded from Cubase Elements 15 yesterday to Pro. Congratulations. All right, and we have Glenn checking in from Suffolk, Virginia. Great to see you on, fellow Virginian. All right, so we have Steven, just says, hi Greg, Cubase 14, I created a MIDI remote device. It works fine with the control surface, but somehow I wound up with a bad CC64 mute mapping under studio setup, generic remote device. Can I just delete all the stuff in there? So if I had kind of what I would probably do, you could, if you have it set up as a MIDI remote, the generic remote may be conflicting with it. So if I had kind of like a generic remote device, you could click on the trash can to get rid of it if you're not using it. Or another thing that people will do is just choose the MIDI input and output to not connected. If you're not sure, maybe I'm using it for some functions and my MIDI remote for other functions, that you could just simply come right over here and choose not connected as well. And that way the MIDI information isn't, from the controller, isn't going to be processed through the generic remote or Mackie control device there. Wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Great to see you on the Zoom meetup Tuesday. All right, we see Uno Memento on from Finland as well. All right, and Michael Teams is firing off his virtual ice cream to Jazz Dude with 1 count of chocolate chip ice cream. All right, so Robert Higgins checking in from Morro Bay, California. It's been a long time. Yeah, great to see you. I was just thinking about you the other day. I saw a picture. I think Morro Bay is the one that has kind of the big rock on the coast there. So I was thinking of you. It's like, I haven't seen him on the live streams, but glad you can make it, Robert. Thanks for joining us and saying hi. We see Randy Lee Music from Texas on. All right, so we see, says, hi, I just upgraded to Cubase 15. I'm missing my projects, can't find them anywhere. All happened when upgraded to 15. So check, because the hub had changed a bit. So if we come over here to the hub, you may have like recent projects here. So generally the recent projects will carry over. So I'm not sure if you like what version you updated from. So if it's like I don't see the projects here, so let me know if you don't see the projects here, or when you go to and click on choose file, if you navigate in your file system, either in Windows Explorer or Mac OS Finder, that you navigate to your particular files if they open there. So you should be able to open them regardless. Sometimes, when you update, if it's been like a few versions, generally like the recent files will automatically be carried over and show up here in your hub. But if it's an earlier, like if it was like maybe Cubase 11 or Cubase 10, that may not work. Generally, it does work, but let me know if you click on choose file here, if you could just open, if you navigate to where your projects are, if you can then open them. All right, we see JazzDude has posted a link to the Cubase sale that's going on. All right. Now we see Tim Weinheimer says the trick is to meet up on Zoom, log in early before the Club Cubase live stream is over. That way you don't lose the Zoom meeting information. It's a good tip. But and you could always email me. I think Jay and Michael Teams just emailed clubcubase@steinberg.de for the Zoom login credentials, and then and from that point, we're able to, I was just able to send them the Zoom invite link. So you could always do that in the future, Peter. All right, so we have Martin Stofa checking in from Great Falls, Virginia, new to Cubase. My first session, so far amazing. Welcome. I just live just down the river from you. I'm just right by between Old Town, Alexandria, and Mount Vernon. So welcome to the live stream. We hope to see you on many future sessions. And welcome to the Steinberg community. All right. All right. Brian Sawyer has received 1 gallon of Texas Select Blackberry ice cream. All right. We see Matt Elston on. Great to see you back. John Koskins joining from a chilly Wisconsin. All right, you see Vince is getting a new iPhone 17 today. Enjoy. All right, so we have East 49 sending peace and love from Brooklyn, New York. Thanks for joining. See, Mohammed just says he's the text feature for the Yamaha keyboard style. Thanks for your help. Yeah, I'll pass it along. Sorry about that. All right, Jack Seed is saying good evening from Norway. All right, East 49 just says peace and love to all in the chat with the Moorish Americans in North America. All right, Conscious Power just says, hey Greg, how you doing? Kudos to Steinberg for bringing Summing Folder. Yeah, I think initially they were hoping to get it in for the 15 release, and some people didn't like the implementation, and Steinberg actually kind of went back to the drawing board and redid it so that it kind of, everyone was like super happy with the feature set, because I think it's great that Steinberg, while it didn't make the initial release, that they took a bold step and actually delayed it a little bit to make sure that the implementation was correct with that. So, but yeah. All right. Okay, so we see from Mohammed, just says, in way my audio test inside hub not showing for left and right test when I used a UR44C. All right, so let's say if we come over here, let me jump to my hub. All right, so let's get to my. I think it's maybe like the first time when you select it that you get to do the test, but let me know if you opened up kind of the audio connections from here. So I think once you do the tour and you end the tour, it may not show up, but let me know if you have audio passing through the UR44C or not. All right, great to see Beverly Beatty on. Just saying hi to myself, Jazz Dude, and everyone in the live stream. She's going to pop in later. Meeting a friend for coffee. And Beverly wants more cowbell, so I'll try to incorporate cowbell for Beverly in upcoming future demo parts. Jazz Dude now posts a link to the Cowbell Fever plugin. All right, so Paul C3248 says, Happy Easter all. Greg, thanks for making my Cubase experience fun. I just kind of show people what the really smart team at Steinberg provide. Yeah, so you see Jazz Dude just commenting on the DSP emulators, and I think one of the things, I'm not sure if I don't think you're on the Zoom meetup, but I think Roland had pasted the ROM content for this particular instrument, so free for users, I think. All right, Terry Gray, great to see you on from Minneapolis, St. Paul. Says very happy with Nuendo update. All right, we have Elvis Titus says from California, just upgraded Cubase 15 from 14. Excited to check out the new features. Bratman Studio wants everyone hit the like button. All right, Guran or Benny is just asking, is there a setting to preview a project in the hub, Cubase 15 Pro? So it's just, if you come right over here, you'll see like this little play project preview. So you could just kind of click there. And usually, like if you make a new project, it would show up in the project preview. So if you just kind of come, you'll see like just this little play icon, and that would just play a little bit of the project. And if you have older projects, I think if we go to edit, there's going to be maybe it's under project that you could create the project preview and set the preview to start to the cursor position, or you could say create when closing a project, and then you just kind of click here, and then you can just simply, navigate between different projects that you have without having to open up the project. It's like, is this the song I was looking for, or is this it? Is this it? So it's kind of a cool feature introduced in 15. All right, so we have Sir Ojidin Faziev says, I haven't been able to make sound on the MIDI keyboard for a long time. I can't find any solution. The sound comes out, but the MIDI sound is not working. I haven't been able to make, okay, so check, so if, start with, I'm not sure if you're doing like MIDI to a virtual instrument or MIDI to a MIDI device, but let's say if I want to come here and I will add an instrument track. Okay, so I'll just come right over here. Going to add an instrument. We'll make it a retro log. Okay, so let's say I have this set up. All right, let me just adjust my control room down a little bit. All right, so a couple of things to check. So one, make sure that the instrument itself is sounding. So if it has a keyboard, see if it plays when you make the actual, when you press the keys. If that is working, you could also hit Alt or Option plus the letter K, and this will open up a virtual keyboard, and you could click here or use the keys like Q, W, E, R, T, Y, U, I from your computer keyboard and see if that is transmitting audio. Once we're here, we want to make sure that, when we click in the routing tab for the instrument, the top little section here, we could have the actual MIDI, the MIDI device connected. So let's say if I had this set to my Steinberg UR24C and my controller is transmitting on USB and it's not connected to my UR242, then I'm not going to hear MIDI. So a lot of times people may set this to all MIDI inputs, and now when you play the keyboard, you can hear the sounds come over here. So if that is set for the correct MIDI input port and you're still not hearing MIDI, try going into your preferences, and then I think if we just go to MIDI, make sure that MIDI through is active, because now if I turn this off, I play my keyboard, nothing is being sent through the computer to the instrument. So again, if you go to your preferences or settings, make sure that MIDI and to MIDI, and make sure that the MIDI through is active. So try those things, and one of those will probably do the trick for you. All right, great to see Gerald Ely on, checking in from Martinez, California. Okay. All right, so Robert Higgins says he found his projects. That's great. All right, Victor Wondersug saying hi. Thanks for being online today. All right, so we see from Jack C says I updated to 15 Pro. I'm glad to see how group track now show on the left side of the channel pane. However, when I open up my previous 14 Pro projects, group tracks don't show in the left channel pane. Is it a bug? All right, so let me see if we can open up. I could save a project in 14 with a group channel. Let me just do that real quick. All right, so let me just route these to a group. Okay, so let me now come over here to the visibility. say I want the group on the left. All right. Okay, so see on the left side channel pane, we want to open up the previous 14 Pro projects. Don't show on the left channel pane. All right, so let me take a look. So I save this, and let me open it in 14. Or we'll open it in 15 rather. All right. So here I can see the groups that were in the left pane, the left zone. So my 14 projects don't show on the left channel. So this looks like it automatically showed up in the left hand side. So let me know if I did anything differently than you did, but it looks like it's kind of working as expected. Okay, so we see from Mohammed Salah, it just says everything in UR44C is working, from outputs and inputs to buffer size is showing. So all right, so Victor Wonderzug says, watching from Uganda, Africa, I made my first song Cubase LE, and I was able to get around the instrument track limitations with MIDI tracks. Okay, well, let us know if you have any questions or anything we could clarify or explain to you. All right, Tim Weinheimer says, Greg, do you have a production model of the CC1 so you can show how to use it with invert EQ? I can't get the invert EQ curve to work. Maybe the CC1 has an issue and a fix is coming in an update. Let me see if I do have one. Let me see if I could get it connected here quickly. Give me just a minute. Don't have it plugged into my computer. Me just for a second and connect it. Let's see if there's any other exit out of 14. Let me see if I may need to externally power it to, here, give me a second. Let's see if this works. power. Yeah, I'm kind of on the edge of USB power. Let me see if I could get it in the control center. Okay. All right, so let's come over here to channel EQ. Okay. All right, so now when I open up, let's say channel here. All right, so let's say I'm going to go to let's say EQ band 2. So let's see if I adjust. All right, so let me just see if we come over. So let me see if I come over here and so let me know, Tim, if you're doing it from like the channel EQ. So here, so we could kind of turn the bands on and off. Like, let's see if it's on a particular page where we have the invert EQ function. So, or if you've assigned it. So if you could let me know, Tim, that would be helpful for me, but I'll leave this connected here. Okay. Yeah. So Tim, let me know if it's like one of the functions that you see in the control center software or not. or if it's something that you kind of did it as a user. Okay, Gerald Ely saying, okay, the project preview is new to me. I just set that up. So. All right, Bob Asad says, thanks for answering my question about MixConsole's configs, snapshots. I get it now. Thanks as always. You're welcome. All right, Jackie Bauer says, I'm learning Cubase and also learning Dorico. Is there a workflow you could show how to get from Cubase to Dorico, or if there's a video, could you help me point to it? So what you could do is just simply come right over here from Cubase and export, like if we have your project here, let me just get something that has some notes, some MIDI parts in it. So once we come over here, we could just choose to export. And I'll just go into, like, let's say our notation editor here. So I'll select all. And then we go to export, just export it as a Dorico project directly from Cubase, and from Dorico you could import a Dorico project as well. And congratulations on getting both those great programs. All right, so we see from Mohammed, how to save remote device configuration in user commands field or backup the setup. All right, so if we're here, I go to my MIDI remote. So let's say, okay, I have this all set up. If you click on the settings tab, you could go to your scripts here. So let's say, okay, we go to scripts, we could select script here, and we can export the particular script. So let's say we go to our MIDI controller, and think that we could export it. I thought it was in this window. Let me just try again here real quick. So once you come here to your scripts, so let's say, okay, you want to come here to like your P4, you'll see export script. So again, come over here to the settings for the MIDI controller, go to the scripts area, select the script, and choose to export script. And then you could save it, email it to yourself, or save it somewhere. And conversely, once you're here, you will see import script from the MIDI remote manager there. All right, Bratman Studio says, hey Greg, just wondering if I could use my Cubase 15 Pro without an internet connection with all plugins, etc. still work, say on a laptop with bad Wi-Fi. So yeah, you could do it. You know, you will need Cubase, you'll need internet to activate the license, and then from there you could run without internet connections. Okay, so we see from Jackseed clarifications is sorry if I should be more exact. I meant the pane all the way to the left when I click the group channel, not the zone. Okay, so let's just go back. I think I know what you're talking about with that. All right, so let's say if I'm here and we have these, I want to turn this into a folder group. Okay. All right, so if we, all right, so I think you want to, let's get to the inspector. So is it just the inspector that you're not seeing on the folder track? Because here, so if we have it as a folder track, so I'll just delete to show the difference here. All right. All right, so let's say we have our folder group track here, and I'm just going to add 4 tracks. And let's route these to a group track. And let's say these are in a folder. So here when I go to the folder, I would have to select the group track, but if it is a folder group track, when I select the folder group track, there, the group track is basically right here within the folder. So the group, this is in basically, let me know if I'm misunderstanding still again, but this is, you have all kind of the group processing and editing capabilities, but it's just being handled directly from the folder. Whereas this, when I click on the folder, I don't see anything, this previous behavior to 1502, then I could select the group channel here. But now we don't need to select the group channel because the folder track is acting as the group channel. But let me know if I'm still being obtuse on my side. All right. So we see from Ramanali 2603 says, "Hi Greg, I had a strange issue in Cubase 15. I created a logical editor preset to reset CC1, CC7, CC11 to specific values. When I press a button, when I apply it manually, it works perfectly. But when I save it as a preset, the values read to 0. I tested the same preset in Cubase 12 and it saves correctly there." I did see something on the forums about this, and I think Steinberg has acknowledged it. I didn't get a chance to read through the thread, but I will kind of follow up with that. I think it might be a bug in 15, but if you go to the official Steinberg forums, I did see a post. I didn't get a chance to read through it yet, but I think it's kind of what you're referring to. All right, so we see Pete Raymond says, Pete from MPEG had emailed in a question about automation panel in Artist 1502. So, we have in Cubase, if I come over here, we could say, okay, we go to the project menu and we have an automation panel. 1502 has added this automation panel to also be in the right zone as well. And we'll have different settings here for, our different automation parameter settings. So that's handy, but I don't think that this is in Artist. I'll go ahead and exit Pro version and go into Artist. So I don't think that it's going to be in the Artist version. So this might be a Pro only feature. Just exit out of Cubase Pro and I'll launch Artist. So we go to the project menu. We don't see the automation panel. We don't see it in the right-hand zone. So I don't think that the automation panel is a part of Artist, but is going to be one of the features found in the Pro version from that. Sorry about that. I'll go ahead and open up Pro. Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. All right, Victor's saying it's just switched to Cubase and I'm learning a lot from this stream. Yeah, we do it twice a week, usually on Tuesday and Friday afternoon starting at 1 p.m. Okay. All right, you see Raw Justice Hip Hop. It says fresh off the Roku from Capitol Heights, Maryland, number 22 on the like button. It says it's been here since the beginning. All right, we see Bratman Studio giving kudos to Jazz Dude for all of his work. All right, Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of Texas almond praline ice cream. Sounds good. See, Raw Justice Hip Hop just mentioned, Dom Chris mentioned 30% off Cubase. It's a perfect time to upgrade. Cubase 15. All right, so we see from Tim Weinheimer, it's already set up in the Stream Deck. Let me just take a look. All right, let me just... And Tim's mentioning that it's already set up in the software and the Stream Deck buttons. Is it in one of these in the Cubase? Let me just see if... Maybe if you want to send a screenshot of your Control Center software, Tim, if you want to email to me at glubcubase@steinberg.de, I'll keep my eyes out for it during the stream. All right, so Raw Justice Hip Hop just says Greg covered. Says you covered a lot of great stuff today. Now that I finished mastering in Wavelab Pro, I'll spend time expanding my Cubase skills. At Groove Agent examples will take me to the next level. All right, Thomas Gunther's just says, I'm interested to see how to work with chord tracks. Can I find some chord progressions from instrument tracks, or is it only working with audio tracks? So you could, derive the chords from MIDI or audio parts. So let's say if I just import a file here. All right, so let's say we'll take this song here. So Hot Mess, early Hot Mess song here. All right, so let's say we go to our chord. I want to come right over here. Let's make a chord track. Drag the file down. So we say we have our chords here. Now I want to go to the chord pads, and we'll see these three little icons here, and we'll assign the chord pads from the chord track. And now we have our chord progression automatically laid out for us. So if we want to add an instrument track, like a Howling and Sonic, so that way we could, take any song, whether it's MIDI or audio, drag it to the chord track, and then from the chord track we could assign the chords from the chord track directly to the chord pads just by clicking on this icon here. So any audio file, any MIDI track that you have, you can automatically extract the chords. All right. So Uno Memento just says, my friend asks, I have an audio track that is just a guitar strum and the tempo varies quite a bit. Can you please explain how I can analyze the tempo and adjust it to a single tempo, please? Yeah, so let me just... All right, so let's say if I just come here, this will have some vocals in it, but we'll get kind of the same idea across here. So if I put on my click track, so I'm going to select a file, go to project, do tempo track, and do my tempo detection. So now you see we have varying tempos here. So say I want to come over now, it'll kind of place it as 1/4 meter. So, but so let's say, okay, like right here, I want that to start my signature track. So we'll put in a 4/4 there. So we have varying tempos here. And if I wanted this to all be a steady tempo, I would select the event, go to advanced, and say set definition from tempo. And then I'm going to, so let's say roughly we're going from 130 to 145. So let's say I want this to be a steady tempo. I'm going to just turn the tempo off and go to my, I'm just going to type in, let's say like a medium tempo here, 136. Now it's playing perfectly steady tempo. So if I want it to be steady, but at 156 instead. Or 120. So once I have done the tempo detection, I select the event, audio to advanced, and set definition from tempo. Then you could just simply turn off the existing tempo track or change it at that point, and it will automatically place that into musical mode. And if you wanted to just have a static value, you can just simply turn this off and enter that in the tempo track, but that's all you have to do. So you take that guitar track that's floating around in time and steady it out. Or if you wanted to edit the existing tempo and say, so you can just come over here and just say, okay, I want to take that and say, okay, let's drag that down, or let's move it down, or compress. So we have less tempo variations or more tempo variations. You can do all sorts of fun stuff. Okay. All right, Constantino official says the window 15 does it go full screen now, and there's no info on having all the Cubase 15 features. Does it? So it does have all the Cubase 15 features. On Mac, it'll do full screen. So once you kind of come over here, you could click on a full screen icon and choose what full screen mode you want it to be in. All right, so we see from Mohammed Salah, it says in up menu, studio step, remote devices, legacy. Let me see if I could scroll back, see if maybe. Let me see if I'm missing. Okay, so you just see how to save remote devices from the. All right, so let's say if we come here, studio setup. So all you have to do here is just export. So let's say if you go to your generic remote, you can export that as an XML file right there and import it back in. All right, so I think I got an email. Let me see if it was from Tim Weinheimer. Bear with me just for a second. Yeah, I think it was. All right, so when I'm on the EQ, all right, so let's see if I have just matching the screenshot here. Okay, so I think I'm on the, let me see if I'm on the, is it this one? Let's see if it's the middle button here is the invert. All right, so come over here to channel 2, the band 2. Yeah, so I think if it's the center, like the middle button here, Tim, this one, I don't have it seem to be working. So I can turn it on and off. Oh, yeah, now, like after I hit it a couple times, so sometimes with Stream Deck, you may have to hit it a few times. Now it seems to be kind of inverting. So if I turn this on, let me turn off channel 2, let's try 3. So you may have to like kind of hit the button a couple times. But now it seems like the inversion is working. Okay. So let me know if that's still not working for you, but it seems to be kind of functioning for me. Thanks for sending over a screenshot. All right, so you see Laga for You says when creating a chord track and place chords, Cubase can't record as a pattern mode. I hear just classic chords. Is there a solution without recording pattern while playing it? So let's say if I come over here and I have an instrument track. Okay, so we'll come over. All right, so now, yeah, so we play the chord. So let me clear my throat real quick. All right. Okay, when recording a track into place chords, Cubase can't record as a pattern mode. I mean, so the idea of the chords when doing kind of the pattern mode is when I come here, I could just say, okay, let's do a pattern. Let's choose a pattern. All right. So now if I record, So if you want the patterns from the chord pads, you would have to actually, choose to, put Cubase into record. And then you'll see kind of the arpeggiated patterns captured. So it says Cubase can't record as a pattern mode. So yeah, so make sure in the chord pads themselves that you have it set to patterns here. Otherwise, it's going to be just chords. And now, when you have patterns, and then you can record those directly into Cubase. All right, so we see from Peter Raymond says, thanks for the clarification on automation. Artist problem is the website says the panel and the last touch settings are available in Artist. I'll review that and touch base. It could be that the last touch parameter is already set and it just behaves and works that way. If we have time at the end, I could do a quick test of that. So it may just be on by default where you can't necessarily turn it off. Let me see if I could start the artist version at the same time here real quick. I'll just confirm real quick. And see if the last touch parameter All right, so I'm going to grab my EQ2 gain, and let's come over here. So you could see the EQ2 gain on, let me just see if there's any preferences for that real quick. So it's showing up. So as I adjust a parameter, so let's say I'm going to adjust my pre gain here, and then it will automatically show up at the top, but it doesn't look like it's automatically selected. But let me see if I automate a parameter. So let's say I automate and I want to adjust the panning. Yeah, so in Artist, it looks like it shows up at the top, but it may not automatically select it. Let me just... Yeah, 'cause usually I would always set up an automation panel. I will see if I can find out any information. If not, I will pass it along to the team so they could have a more accurate. Usually pretty good about that. And I can see if there's some trick to do it because I don't think the automation, let me just look. I don't see the automation panel on there. So it looks like it shows up at the top, but it may not automatically be selected. But I'll play around with it more over the weekend and see if I get any clarity on that. Sorry for that confusion. All right, so we see from John Barry says, hi Greg, Cherry Audio DCO 106 response to the scaling shortcut keys. Not bad for a cheap plugin. Is this a certain version number of VST where this became possible? So it's probably with VST3. So there's a lot of stuff within VST3 within the particular plugin specifications that a lot of companies don't necessarily fully utilize. So a lot of plugins may be written in like, a tool called Juice, Juce. So a lot of times when people do that, it could be pretty generic and not really take advantage of all of the advanced implementations. So if you see plugins are doing that, it's probably written in Juice perhaps. But I think it's VST3. All right, it says when setting up a vocal group channel with lead vocals, background vocal ad-libs, is there a way to have each different colors when I pick my tracks and create a group folder track and create group folder tracks? It changes to the folder color. All right, so I think it's a preference. So let's go ahead and add a number, let's say 4 audio tracks. And now we're going to create a group audio track. Or folder with group track here. All right, and so I think if we go here to your preferences or settings, I think it might be an event and display in folders. All right, so now let's say if I add, so I think it's going to be this, so let me just add an audio track here. Let me add audio. Okay, so we can see that these are different colors than our folder track. So if we go to the preferences, event display folders, apply color of folder tracks automatically, and we choose never. That once I drag these in, they retain their individual colors. If I toggle that preference or setting, come over here and we'll say, with group channel, we say always. Now we can see that the color of these two will match the folder. So I drag that in and the colors have now changed to that of the folder track. So just you could change this preference, event display, folders, and just look right there. All right, Giorgio Phoenix just says, hi Greg, I hope you're doing well. I have a question. How can I set up my native instruments complete control S88 Mark III with Cubase? So far I haven't been able to use all of the functionalities. So, I'm not sure if you it could depend on what functionality kind of you're seeking. I see, Jazz, you kind of asked the same question. There's probably going to be MIDI remote scripts. So once you come over here, I would look for a MIDI remote script for that. There's probably one online. I think Native Instruments may have created MIDI remote scripts, and that would give you kind of the highest level of integration, with Cubase. So I think, that would be kind of the way to go. So I would look for Native Instruments MIDI remote script. You can make your own, but there's probably someone that's already created it. All right, so Lunrick just says, Greg, will Cubase ever implement direct pitch automation on the track, audio, instrument, etc.? I mean, so let's say if we have a track here, you could do it with a plugin. So I'm not sure. Direct pitch automation. So we'll take the track we're listening to. So check out the, if you go under pitch shift, there is pitch shift plugin. We could lock it to semitone. So let's say while we're go down 2 octaves. So if I wanted to come over here and, we could just automate our pitch there. Let me just go to my automation settings here real quick. So now you could just kind of draw in. So if you wanted to just, automate drawing into pitch, and this could automatically just, go by semitones here if you wanted to. So check out the pitch shifter plugin. All right, so you see something as natural as volume automation. It's a bit difficult for me to keep opening pitch shifter using the sample track to quickly create a pitch effect. That's kind of the fastest way to do it now, but I'll pass on your feature request. All right, John Barry just says, there's always a but it's hard to repeat myself, but if I could save folder groups as track presets too, that'd be awesome for the EQ, add string quartet to a song. All right, so let's say we have, just add instrument track here. So let's do string quartet. so we'll create our string quartet. Almost done. Okay, so we'll say all right. So let's go make this into a folder group. So if we want it to come right over here. All right, so one of the things you could do is just actually, save a track preset. And we'll call this quartet. And I know this isn't. All right, let's see what happens if we export our selected tracks. I know this isn't the same. Okay, I'll do a new project here. Create empty. So we'll import our track archive. Quartet. So that's automatically carried them over as a folder track. You could also, so let's say if we save this song as quartet, and if we do a new project again, and we choose to import tracks from selected project, let me see if I then that's automatically carried over that way, but it's not a track preset, which I realize would be more convenient. But there are some ways of doing that quickly if you needed to. All right, so we see from Luminaire, when should I use a rack versus instrument tracks in a real project, and what would a scalable Cubase template look like using rack instruments for drums and keys? So it used to be, historically, we wanted the same concept of, like, when we introduced VST instruments, lots of people had hardware racks full of tone modules and synthesizers generating sounds, drum machines, samplers. So we kind of had the rack, which was kind of a virtual version of that, kind of the same paradigm. You see the rack, you route a MIDI track to your software rack just like you did to your hardware rack. Now, initially that was how it was set up, but a lot of people who never worked with hardware instruments, we introduced the instrument track to kind of simplify it. And the instrument tracks originally had some limitations of that it was going to be just not be multi-timbral, and it wouldn't allow you to have multiple outputs on an instrument track. So one MIDI channel, one stereo out, simple, fast, easy way to go. Since then, we've added the capability of multiple outputs on instrument tracks. And if you have an instrument track, so let's say if I come over here to an instrument track and we choose Hallian Sonic, and let's say if I was running this in a multi-timbral realm where, okay, I wanted to have MIDI channel 1, MIDI channel 2, and I wanted to be able to access this, we could start with an instrument track to start, and then when I double click, we could add a MIDI track, and that MIDI track is automatically routed to that. So if you want to use, I would say use instrument because it consolidates kind of the MIDI information with the audio output automatically. So I would tend to use all instrument tracks, and then if I was using a multi-timbral instrument, then I would use MIDI tracks to get to, once that instrument track has been created, I would use MIDI tracks to get MIDI directly out to my multi-timbral instrument. But generally, I would always tend to use instrument tracks these days. Okay, so we see from okay. Okay, so we see from Peter Raymond, just says, thanks again. This live stream is an amazing resource. Thank you for the kind words. It always means a lot. So we see from 54 Beatmaker, says logical filtering is a big part of my Cubase workflow, but I can't find it in the right zone media bay, only in a full media bay. Is it not supported there? So let's say if we go to my media bay here. All right. So let's say if we come over here to our loops, I think if we click here, we could now kind of show the different filters. So, is it this that you're looking to get access to? Like with when you say just make sure I understand that you want to do kind of the logical filtering. I think you can hide that just by clicking on this little icon here in the upper right hand side. So try, if that's kind of what you're looking for, so you can say I'm looking for drum, that's pop, and kind of filter here. So if you don't see that, just kind of click right here in that button. All right. Great to see Daniela's Da Vinci Girl from Bochum, Germany. We see Tiago from Brazil. Thanks for joining. All right, we have Soul Sound Official saying hi to everyone. All right, so we see Studio. It says, Greg, when I go to tweak a third-party JE8086 plugin, press the spacebar to start Cubase 15, I have to first click the main window to start. Is there a setting where all the windows are live without back and forth? So I'm not sure if that particular plugin is like hijacking the keys with that. So, but let's say if I open up a Hallian Sonic here, my transport, when I hit space, I make this the active window. So my space bar is still going to be always fixed. So I'm not sure if it's anything in a plugin that's kind of hijacking the particular the key from the computer keyboard, as opposed to, I can't really think of any VST plugins that do that. I was going to spend time this weekend getting that plugin up on my system, but it seems like most plugins. Let's go ahead and try instrument track. So let's come over here. Let's say if I go to the Grand, so even if we come here, this is the active window. My transport isn't my key commands, and maybe we don't design our plugins to hijack key commands. But let me know if it's only with that particular plugin, and maybe that plugin is just kind of, doing something a little nefarious, kind of hijacking the keyboard shortcuts. Sometimes people don't realize that you're using a plugin in another program. All right, so we see from Jackseed, it says in 14, only selecting the instrument audio tracks would show the full channel in the channel inspector to the left. In 15, group and effects tracks now also work, except when opening old projects, it seems. So let's see if I think I still have. See if I open up the project we made in 14. See if this is the one that we made in 14. All right, so I come here to so we enable the group channel. Then, so maybe let me know if I'm misunderstanding. Sorry about that. Or if you want to email me like a picture to show the difference. All right. Yeah, so maybe Jackseed, if you want to send me a quick screenshot. I fear I'm still not understanding. All right. Chiluminaire says, beyond gain and timing, what are next level waveform editing techniques? Something that is always like really good. So, with Cubase, you get a copy of spectral layers. So if you wanted to, let me just import an audio file here. So we're pretty used to having Dead Man's Blues. All right, so doing like ARA type editing can be like really useful, especially you get a spectral layers 12. So if I come over here, so most editing is going to be kind of timing, and volume for waveforms. But if we wanted to actually kind of get more detailed editing, we could go into, and you have a spectral layers go and now a wavelab go with Cubase. So now when you double click, we can actually come over.
There's crying in heaven. Let the rain come down.
So, and what we're seeing here is kind of like the waveform, kind of if we were almost to kind of split it and rotate the waveform around. So let's say we have like this waveform here. So we're used to kind of seeing this, but what we could do now is come over and choose to do like spectral editing. So you could select kind of different frequencies. Like, okay, if you have a, something that was like a squeak of a piano pedal or a guitar squeak, you could come in here and just kind of delete not all of the frequencies, but just particular frequencies within the audio. So when we do editing in our particular waveform here, so let's say, as we do our audio waveform, we edit all of the frequencies, but when we go into spectral editing, which you have spectral layers go, you could actually edit particular frequencies and not affect others in the waveform. So if you haven't really explored like your spectral layers 12 Go, or if you have spectral layers Pro, you could do some like amazing types of like very surgical editing with that. All right, so Muhammad Salah says, thank you so much. I wish you a long and healthy life for your explanations and for helping people. It's a joy to be able to help others. Thank you for the kind words. All right, Luminaire says, thanks for the history of rack and instrument tracks. All right, so you see from John Barry, says, like, I can still save several tracks as a preset, create a folder group after. Just missed a group effects, but I have an FX chain preset, just not as many. So it is, I understand it is more mouse clicks, and I think we'll see, more stuff. This is obviously kind of the very, very first incarnation of folder tracks with group channels. So I think hopefully we'll be able to see more, more workflow optimizations in the future. All right, so Raja says hip hop, says I did it, Greg. Cubase Pro 15, congratulations. All right, so 54 Beatmaker says, no, you misunderstand my question. Logical filtering in media bays are a way to search files using rules and conditions instead of just simple tags. Conditions equals greater than, contains, operator. So with that, you're going to, need to use the full media bay. That's, the intention of kind of the right zone media bays for, quickly scrolling through presets, auditioning loops. But if you wanted to do more kind of Boolean conditions, that would be, the proper tool for that would be kind of the full media bay for that. Sorry for misunderstanding. All right, Daniel Pashman says, hi, Greg. It would be awesome if the session key could be visible in the status line section. I know you could do the root key, but the minor major scales of visibility would be super helpful. All right, so if you have a chord track, so let's say if we come here, and it may not show it on the info line, but let's say if I want to take this particular song here, I'm going to add a chord track, drag this song down. And we'll notice that I'll put the chord track at the top here, that the chord track is automatically determined the scale. So we can say, okay, this song is in the key of F major. So we can just come right over here and we could see what the actual key has been determined by utilizing the chord track. It's not on the info line, but you could see it directly there on the chord track if you need to as a reference point. All right. So Rick from Bratman Studio asked Greg, if I open up my Focusrite interface for my ADAC 4A4, it will hijack the Mac as well. Try plugins and let you know soon before the end of today. So one of the things you do if you're like switching back and forth between like, YouTube and Cubase, and you're watching the live stream and trying stuff out in Cubase, is if you go to the studio menu here and go to studio setup, if you select your audio system on the left hand side, you could also try to toggle the setting of the release driver when the application is in the background. So try that setting there. All right. Wonderful to see Graham Witcher checking in from Oxford. Glad you could join us today. Luminaire says, I've had Spectral Layers 12 sitting unused. I'm going to start using it now. Thanks. That's great. Yeah, definitely worth pulling it out. All right, so let's go to a couple of questions that were mailed in. All right, so one of the questions was how to do a ducking delay on a vocal. All right. Okay. All right, so now a lot of times we want to use a ducking delay when we want kind of intelligibility. Sometimes if you have just a particular vocal and you have a delay on constantly, it could be hard to understand the words. And sometimes you want like the delay to actually happen more when there is like when the singer isn't happening. So let's say if I come over here, we have our vocal.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago.
All right, and I'm going to put a delay on it, it's like a studio delay.
Grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through.
So if I left that on and like this song's kind of a ballad, that would kind of probably be a bit overwhelming.
It caught my breath while you called me to.
But maybe I want it when there's the space in the vocal, I want this a little bit of the delay to kind of cascade in. So I'm going to duplicate this particular track. So I'm going to right click and let's go to duplicate tracks. So as we come over, we'll say, okay, now we're going to have this track. I'm going to activate the sidechain. All right, so just click right here. And I'm going to, instead of just doing like using sends, I'm going to take this track and instead of it going out to the stereo out, I'm going to choose for this sidechain to go directly into the output of this track to go into the sidechain input. So we're not going to hear this track. This track isn't routed to the main output, or we're going to hear the vocal doubled. But when this track is in, it's going to duck down the delay. So we'll listen to it.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago.
All right, so we come over here.
7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart.
So now we could
shone
enable the
through.
sidechain.
It caught my breath while you called me to. Well, even now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long.
So we could have that, and I'll just adjust my feedback here.
Oh, I remember the day.
So when there's not, so if we take the sidechain off,
long time ago.
so we hear the delay constantly
Our
on.
first kiss, there
Now we
was
could
no
tame
regret
that just by having,
after that
and we could set the amount of the sidechain here. So say, okay, I want,
Told your daddy and he called my mom. Said you were too damn good for any boy that dumb.
so
His
now we do this.
soured words are now dead and done. That was a long, long time ago.
So when he's singing, you don't really hear the delay as
Now
much.
our two grown
So you could just kind of come right over there and just kind of activate the sidechain on a delay. We could come over here. We're going to use kind of the duplicate, and then we could adjust the amount, how hard that sidechain is hitting as well. All right. Let's jump back, see if we have more live questions. Okay. All right, we see Graham Witcher's received 1 gallon of blackberry ice cream. All right, John Barry just says, one more minor thing I noticed that when you show the color for the time display device, that the background color does not change. Yeah, so I passed that along. I think we did that maybe before I was on vacation, so I passed that along. So hopefully that'll be resolved. But thanks for bringing it up. All right, let's get to the next question that's mailed in. Okay, so it says, this next question about chord pads. Greg, I ain't going to school to learn all this, but I can hear the chords in my mind. My example I sent you, I took a WAV file from Media Bay and dropped it into the chord pad track. When the notes were extracted, it shows it as F major we are dealing with. If you take your mouse and hold it down right over the section I highlighted, it actually sounds each note that is in scale, F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, on a piano. Pretty cool. Is there a quick way to tell in the chord pads to populate with chords that fit the F major scale automatically? I had to go into the circle of fifths on the right, where it's double click manually on each corresponding pad to get my F, G, A, B flat, C, D, and E chords. Thank you so much. All right. So if we do a song, so let's see if I still have that project open.
dollars.
All right, let me see if it's this one. All right, so let's say I'm going to add a chord track to this. All right, so let's come over here, add a chord track. I'll drag this down to the chord track. All right, so let's say this is showing us in the key of, F sharp minor. So when we come here, we could, again, just kind of click here and, you could sound the chords if you had an instrument track that was loaded up. But if we wanted like an F major chord or the keys, all the chords for F major on the chord pads. There's new presets with 1502. I think these are the ones that I passed on to Steinberg, which have been in the Discord for a while. So if we go to, I think it'll be scale. So you'll see these are new presets. So you can say, let's go to scale major Ionian mode. All right, so now we have major scale, and what we want to do is just simply to set the root key to F. So this way we have an F chord. So let me just add a quick instrument track. Let's say we'll do a little grand piano action. So now when I come here, we could just have all of the different chords. So, and what a lot of people would want it like, okay, I want an F. And you can have seventh chords, which work in the key. So if you wanted to just come over here and say, now I'm in the key of D, we could just change the root. And this would, when you go to scale, you'll see that you'll have all of the different modes. So if you're in, minor or Aeolian, Ionian, so you can say, okay, here's our natural minor. So, and then you just simply set the root key. So this will all be kind of the same pattern. So check out and this came in 1502. I think you could also download these from, the different mode presets from the Discord, the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, or in 1502, just look for those new presets, all your modes, and you could just simply set kind of the tonal center for, so if you want to be an F minor, you again come right over here and you'll see scales. I just want this to be Ionian, which is major. So just simply set those, use those new presets, and it's great that Steinberg implemented those. All right. All right, let's jump back to the live chat. Graham Witcher's giving thanks to Michael Teams for the blackberry ice cream. Randy Lee says he likes the F draconian mode. Okay. All right, let's jump to the next question mailed in. Okay, so we have questions also dealing with chord pads. How do I keep a piano pattern going? Example, I'm pressing a pad on the chord pads. I can hear the pattern play along with the chord, such as Epic Piano Ballad, shown in my example. But when I drag the chord pad to the MIDI track and set up a virtual piano synth on that track, it just plays the basic chords and not the pattern from the chord pads. Okay, so let's say here I have... All right, so let's go ahead and load up a quick pattern here. So we'll choose our Epic Piano Ballad. All right, so, as we had mentioned before, when I come here, what we would want to do to capture these chords over is, if we drag these over, they're going to be just kind of plain chords. So just block chords when we look at it. But what we actually need to do is to simply record our MIDI as we do this. So I'll come over here. Let me just mute this. All right, so now. So I'm just going to trigger the chord from. And now that I'm playing it, it will automatically capture this. So in essence, I'm triggering the particular arpeggios, and now when we go over to look at it, we can just, when we go to listen to it now, we'll see that those arpeggio patterns have automatically been captured. So instead of dragging the pattern isn't included when it's dragged. You have to actually kind of record the performance. And then that performance, as you record it, is automatically going to be captured over. So just try just to record the performance of you triggering the chord pads, playing through the patterns there. All right, see if we have any more other live questions sneak in. All right, Tommy Valen, hi, great question. How to move the new folder / group track in Mixer to the right zone? I can move one, but not the other. So I think that they're going to be kind of fixed into the center zone. So let me just do a new project here real quick, just to show. And I'll just move 13 through 19 to a group track. And let's move these to a folder group track. So we have 3 folder group tracks and 1 group track. All right, so now we're in the MixConsole. So I think the design intention, so if we have a folder track, is that you could kind of expand and close the folder tracks. So I know it's, so I could just say, okay, here's my folder track. So as we kind of go to the visibility with the zones, we can, the zone will be, kind of fixed here because, we could just collapse the particular folders. But I will pass it on as a feature request to be able to move the particular folders, to anchor it to zones. So, but you could just kind of expand and collapse the particular folders directly, right here from within the folders as well, which is super handy. So you may not need, I think once people kind of know that this exists, that they may not necessarily need to anchor as much in the MixConsole, because you could just expand. I think if we just hold down, we could expand directly from within the MixConsole as you see fit. So there's probably lots of people rebuilding templates, but I'll pass it along regardless. All right. As we see from Randy Lee Music, hi Greg, I have an Akai MPD 218. Could that be used like a Stream Deck to program those pads for certain key shortcuts? Thanks. Yep, so definitely. So all you'd have to do is if you go into the MIDI remote, and there's probably, I think there's Akai controllers already in here, so I'm not sure. Let's see which one you have. Is it MPK? And I'm sure that it's a popular controller that's already available. Let me just find your MPD. But you could always just kind of, easily create a new MIDI remote from that. And then once you have, and basically you could assign the different keys. And then you would come right over here. You choose, okay, I want these to be 18 knobs. And then you could go directly into your settings here and assign functions for each of the knobs. So look for a Cubase MIDI remote script. Jazz Dude shared a link where you could download a bunch of them. And then you could define anything that transmits a MIDI message. Basically, you could have it, use that MIDI message to control particular functions in the program. All right. All right, so Ghost Beyond Earth says, question on chord pads. How do I go up and down octaves? Okay, so let's come over here to our chord pads. And let me load up an instrument here so we could hear it. So we'll do kind of classic CP80. All right, so let's come over here. All right. All right, so let's say if we want to. So it could really matter on kind of how the chord is spelled out. So let's come over here. Let's get to the chord pads. All right, so if we come here, we could say, okay, I want to transpose up. Now, when we actually go to chords, I think we could also just come here if you want to adjust the voicings. Or add more tensions. And you could choose, okay, do I want it to be guitar voicings? So it could really kind of, you could switch back and forth between, you know, and then you have chord voicing styles where you could say, okay, I want this to be custom. I want them to be 3-string triads. So if you just kind of click here in the player, then you could also just go to your chord voicing styles. You could have all options, modern jazz, 3-string triads, or if you want it to be custom, then you could adjust different voicing characteristics for the pads right there. All right. Okay, so we see from Dalbsky, hi Greg, how to sync a track to your project tempo. All right, so I'm not sure if it's like a 2-track mix, but let's say I will come over here. And I will import. So you need to make sure that the track is in musical mode. Now, if the track has a steady tempo, then if you know what the tempo is, you could assign that tempo. But I'll show you we'll just import quick audio file here. All right. So let's say we want to take this, and this track isn't conforming to my tempo.
Maybe it's a sparkle in her eyes, or just the time she was living in. But it was
So I'll take this and again we need to figure out what the tempo of this is. Often tracks that seem like they're steady may be speeding up and slowing down. So I'm going to do a tempo detection. Okay. Now that we do a tempo detection,
just the time she was living in.
and sometimes you may have to adjust for offbeats. So if I was too quick on the gun, so let's get to my tempo detection again. I'm going to listen to it this time.
But it was real fast, dangerous, and certainly a sin. Looking up and then glancing away. The politics
And then I could also divide by 2 if I wanted to.
Then it was gone. It was a 90-second blush. It was a 90-second love affair.
All right, so now we have that. All I need to do is come over here. And if you know what the tempo is of the file, we could just double click here. And if we go into like the sample editor, you could go into your definition and set the tempo directly here and place it into musical mode. If the tempo is varying, like we see here, I go to my advanced and we say, okay, I want to go to audio menu to advanced to set definition from tempo. And then this would automatically, so the tempo changes of this file are automatically going, we see this, but now if I wanted to match the tempo, I'll start with a brand new tempo track. So now it's going to play back. And let's say if I have tempo changes going on, I could just come right over here. And now this file and we'll follow the project tempo.
We were doing things in our minds that would make our mothers blush. It was a 90-second love affair. There was something magic in the air.
So that way you could take something that was recorded at a completely different tempo, have it fit into whatever tempo your project is set to. And if it's just a steady tempo, like a loop, a commercial loop that's intended to always be steady, you could just double click and go to the definition tab, make sure that the tempo is embedded there, and just put it into musical mode. And that will automatically be kind of tempo parasite following the project tempo for you. All right, so we see from TrackQuest Music, hi Greg, my download assistant is giving me an error all the time, and I updated everything it asked me to do. Any idea or ideas to fix? Failed to update components, went to the website and updated. Everything still gives the same error. So sometimes it could be, like a firewall kind of, or an antivirus software that is that's blocking the Steinberg download assistant from functioning. So you could try, if you have any antivirus software on your system, try to disable it or allow it to ignore, and it could be Windows Defender maybe, look at the Steinberg download assistant to see if it's being blocked by any kind of antivirus software. All right, so we have a question from Jugar the studio. How to split track stereo to mono, please? 2 tracks mono on track stereo. All right, so let's say we have a stereo track here. All right, so what I want to do is I'm going to select the track here, go to project, and we'll say convert tracks multi-channel to mono. And now I have the left and right channels of my stereo track. So we could mute that, and here are the left and right channels. And if I wanted to take these 2 tracks that are mono and make it into a stereo track, I come over here, let's go to project, to convert tracks, and we'll say mono to multi-channel. We'll make it stereo track, and so you could, we'll take it off more, but so that's all you had to do is just simply select, go to project, and convert tracks. All right, Gerald Ely says lots of stuff to try later. Great job, Greg. Have a great weekend. Same to y'all. All right. All right, so you see I'm in the process of moving everything from Cubase library to an external drive, and follow your instructions, choosing move from the library manager, but it misses some. Do I manually move those? You can manually move it, and just do, if you go to Media Bay to that particular folder and rescan it. So let's say if we come over to your Media Bay and go to this computer, and wherever your external drive is, you could just come over and just and then you could right click and just choose to rescan that particular folder. Maybe trying to scan my CC121. So, and then you can say, okay, it's in this particular folder. Come over here, you'll see kind of your typical file tree, and say, okay, you can say look into this folder and rescan, right click, and you could rescan the disk directly from there. But let me know which ones didn't move over, because when you do the library assistant, there's a number of different options that are available. So you can see all of your howling content. You have different tab for Groove Agent, for the loops that come with it, the Grand, Pad Shop libraries, Retrolog libraries, and Backbone libraries as well. So make sure that you go through all the tabs. All right, great to see Mark Raven on. Everyone could give a big woof to Stella, Mark's dog. All right, so we see from Ghost Beyond Earth. Thank you, Greg. That was so simple. See, you learn about chord pads and chord tracks, and Jesse says no AI needed. It's actual real intelligence, so we don't like that artificial kind. All right, you see Mark Raven just says, got Groove Agent 6 and he's a happy puppy. So it took a while to scan the media bay. Thought it messed up so badly, but it pulled through, and now I'm making tunes again. All right, great to hear. All right, so we see from Photo Mesek, says, hello, I have Cubase's LE3 upgraded to Cubase 3. If I want to update Cubase 3, don't recognize my already purchased license. I don't know how to upgrade. Thanks. So let me know if it is, so generally a lot of those are kind of out of our control because you have to, you're utilizing the Play Store or the Apple App Store. So I'm not sure which one, which, if you're on Android or iOS. But if you want to email me more details, you could go to, if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. But check within your app store if you have the actual, what license you have, and make sure it's not an LE license and sees your LE license as opposed to the full Cubase license. All right, so we see, hello, Greg. Thanks for the answer about the chord pad. I request, could you give some general tips for electronic music production to achieve a smoother flow? So let's say we just want to build like a quick EDM track using chord track and chord pads. All right, so let's come over. So let's see if we can build a quick EDM style track, and I don't purport to be an EDM producer, but let's say I want to start with the drum track here. Okay, we'll just start with the preset. Okay, so I'm going to build a quick drum pattern here. Let's make it 32 steps. Okay. All right, so let's come over here. All right, so let's come over here. I'll just put in. All right, so let's say we have this. So I'm going to add a chord track. And let's come over here to my chord pads and let's find like a scale. We'll do a major scale, and I want this to be in D. So I'm going to drag. Let me just do a quick I'll just go back to beginning. Let's do like 8 bars. Okay, so as we want to do this, I'll put this in a loop. All right, so I'm going to add just like a quick synth part. Let's do a bass part on this. So we'll do like a retro log. All right, and so what I'm going to do is just drag these. So let's say I don't want to actually play a key. I'm going to come over here and let's put this in like an arpeggiator. So I'm going to come over and say, and if we want to maybe edit this up, let's move the octave up. And let's take this chord track. I'm going to add another instrument. We can just do another retro log here. Let's look for vintage classics. Let's look for like synth, brass. Okay. So now I will have this track. So we'll say, okay, let's take this track, move it down. And we can make this a little brighter with our cutoff. Let's say I want to knock this up an octave here. So we could just come over and we could transpose up 12. So now let's say we want to just do like some modulators going on it. So let's say, okay, let's take and I'll come over here to this. So you could just kind of come over and you know, just without even playing a note, using chord pads, kind of use different arpeggiators, use kind of different rhythmic elements, and have, you know, very easy to work with coming up with ideas. So, you know, you don't have to be a great keyboard player to just kind of sit there and experiment. So play with the chord track and use that as the basis, and then, you know, everything can be, you know, musically correct with that. So let me know if that's helpful at all. So we see from Sorens is one thing I'm very interested in. I wonder if you could talk about a Greg Yamaha Creator Pass. Very interesting to get distribution and get the music to curators. Do you know much? I kind of saw just like a little blurb on that, and I had asked different people at Yamaha about it, but I think it's, and no one really seems to know too much. I may be able to get some questions. I have some meetings with some Steinberg people next week. I may be able to kind of get a rough idea of what's going on, but I think it's something that's being done by Yamaha in Japan, and I don't know a lot of details on it, but I'll see if I can find out. Okay. Okay, we see Chiluminaires checking out. Have a great weekend. All right. So we see from Rick of Bratman Studios says Greg developing hijacking keyboards. This looks like only the JE8086 Jackson system or Interior Mini Freak, Behringer and Steinberg VSTs don't hijack. So yeah, it may be within the plugin there's perhaps a setting for changing keyboard shortcuts or something like that. So maybe that one key could be remapped to do something else. So see, Mark Rabin says he woke up to snow this morning. So yeah, we dropped like 30 degrees in one day this week. So from 87 to 57 one day. All right, Rob Schmedicke just says, when I select by double-clicking on a MIDI note in the editor window, it jumps the note up higher in pitch. However, I thought it used to delete the note. Is there a preference I should choose? So it's going to delete the note by default. So if I come over here, when I double-click, it's going to delete the note. There is a preference setting. So you may see this little edit key here, this could do for note expression editing. So when you double click, that would open the note expression editing, but not move it up. I would say that if you're double clicking and the note is moving up, that maybe I see like weird things with this, and lots of programs have issues if you're using like an Apple Magic Mouse. Sometimes the sensitivity on the mouse can be so high that when you in between the double click, maybe your accident, it could actually be registering that the note is moving up if the mouse was moved ever so slightly in between the two clicks. So see if, but yeah, there isn't a preference for that. I think it's probably going to be maybe a mouse sensitivity issue. So, but when you double click here, by default, when this option is turned on, when you double click, it'll open up like the note expression editor for doing like MPE edits. But when that's off, what I think is probably happening is maybe the first click and maybe it's being moved up like that between the first and second click. So some mice, the Apple Magic Mouse is notoriously bad for this type of stuff. That when you double click, like this sensitivity, like, oh, it's a super high resolution sensitive mouse, and it kind of works against you a lot of times. So if you have adjustments for the sensitivity of the mouse, I would try to lower that and see if that makes a difference. But double clicking by default will delete the note. All right, so we see from TrackQuest Music, says Mac OS Sequoia, no antivirus software, went into system settings, allowed full disk access, plus app accessibility and app management, still error, probably need a support ticket. Yeah, I mean, you probably could just, you could always do the downloads directly from, if you wanted to get like 1502 let's say if I'm here and we just go to the website, so let's say if you go to like Cubase 15 downloads, you could also just download directly from the website if the Steinberg download assistant is acting up on you. So let me know if you've tried that as well. But you could download and install without the Steinberg download assistant. Okay. All right, so Soul Sound Official is asking, hi Greg, can you please show how to do parallel using the new folder group, and what is the best way to route groups now with the folder tracks? So if we have, I'll just open up a project here. So say we'll take our drums from this. Okay, so let's say I have these tracks in, like my drum tracks in a folder. Let's just get the right sample rate. Sorry about that. All right, let me see if I get the right sample rate quickly here. All right. Okay, so let's say I want to turn this into, like my drum tracks here into so we'll take, they're already routed to a folder, so I'm going to come here, let's enable the group channel on the folder, and I want to add another group track, and I'm going to place that in the existing folder. Okay, and we can do the output routing to the stereo out. That's probably what we want to do. Okay, so now I want to take all of these particular tracks and I'll go to the sends here, or we could use direct outs. I will take all of my drums here and the sends. I'm going to activate Quick Link by holding down Alt or Option plus the Shift key, and we're going to send it to group 2, turn it on, and we set it to an absolute value here. Okay, so we'll say, so now this is my routing folder, this is my parallel folder, so let's come over here and just do our parallel processing. So now all within one particular folder with group track. I have not only the main group here, but the parallel processed here. And if I want to just collapse that from view and expand to view, so it's really kind of the same exact thing, but when we go into our project window, I could now just collapse. So we could have multiple folders within that particular one. So let me know if that makes sense for you, but it's really kind of the same exact process, just even a little more simplified. All right. All right, we see Sable Winters joining from the San Francisco Bay Area. Great to see you on the live stream or on the Zoom on Tuesday. All right, and Sable's like number 98. All right. See Graham Witcher just mentioning Retrolog has some phenomenal patches. Love it. Same with Pad Shop. And Jazz Dude's also mentioning Trip Flux and Writing Room Synths as well. All right. Jazz Dude sharing some Flux tutorials. Thank you for that. Mark Rabin just says, hey, guess what, y'all? It's the weekend. So, almost. I'm looking forward to a couple days off. All right. All right, Mark Rabin just asked, hi, Greg, will you give us a quick 4-tip rundown on the latest update? All right, so one of the big things is obviously the folders with group channel. So lots of people have been wanting this for a long time. So right now we have everything in a folder track, and before we could have a macro to assign it to a group as well, which worked well, but now I could take my existing folder track, right click, and now we could have one folder track that is the folder in the group. Doesn't like that project. So that's one of the big new features. So that simplifies a lot of routing. So your folders and groups can be linked together. When we want to some other things that we could do, let's just come over here. When we go to export audio or to export video, there's been some nice changes with that. So when we go to export video, it used to be that we could export the video to the same particular size. So let me just come over, open up a quick video project. So a lot of work went into now when we go to export our video file. So initially when we did export, we did like a really high quality video export, but the file could be large. And so we could replace the audio in the existing video, or now when we render, we can choose different resolutions for the exported. So we could have much smaller video export sizes. I like having the automation parameters. So instead of having the automation panel as a separate floating window, I like being able to have all the automation settings here in the right zone as well. So, if you want to suspend reading and writing, there's also some new like copy and paste automation functions that are really handy. You get also Wavelab Go. So if you don't have a Wavelab license, there's Wavelab Go is going to be coming with it. So those are, and one of the updates that happened a couple weeks ago is also, when we go to like Retrolog or Pad Shop, that those instruments are resizable now. But I would say kind of the big one that people have been wanting for a long time is the making the folder tracks and integrating that with the group channels. Okay. All right, so we see Jack C just says essentially email. Let me see if I could dig it up real quick on my phone while I'm on the live stream here. Okay, let me just take a look at the images here that were emailed to me. All right, so looking at the two images here. All right, so it says, all right, let me just recreate this quickly. And I think we had, let me just open up. This is from, so let's say if I opened up from 14, so let's come over here back to desktop. And we had the group. This was the one we saved in Cubase 14. Okay, so when we come over here, we see my folders on the left. So this is, and okay, so it says in a fresh Cubase 15 project, when selecting your group track, it shows up in the channel panel. In the channel panel, miss this feature in 14. All right, so let's say I add a group channel here. All right, and then we get to the inspector, we see it over here. So we may have different colors, but there's our new group that we just added. Okay. And then it says, however, if I open a Cubase 14 project, which this is, in 15, selecting a group track, it does not show up. So let's say if I select this particular file, all of my settings are showing up here. Let's say if I move the group outside of it, so our group is here. It still seems to be showing up. Maybe if you want to send me a project that you're having problems with, Jackseed, then I'd be happy to take a quick look at it to see if it's maybe just one particular project. All right. All right, Graham Witchers just says, amazing having Wavelab Go and an update. The latest update is fabulous. All right. All right. All right, Brian DeBear asks, when working with video, is there a way to direct the video portion to a different screen for viewing? So once you have, let's just jump back to project I had open here. So let's say if I hit F8, you can just simply kind of come right over here. Let me activate the project. And then all you have to do is just drag the video window to a different screen, and then if you have multiple screens, you could just drag it over to a different screen, and while it's on a different screen, if you want to right click, you could actually just put it into full screen mode if you wanted to, and right click again to exit full screen mode. Right. All right, so Soul Sound Official says, is there a way to pin the folder tracks into mixer left and right too when choosing a track from a folder like mix bus, pre-mastered? The folder appears in the center of the mixer. So as we've answered a couple times, it looks like it's going to be fixed to the center position. All right. All right, I think we had another question that was mailed in. Go to question. All right. Okay, so we have, I think it's with the chord pads as well. It says, example, if I had a non-assigned chord pad, want to drop onto that pad, D chord, i.e. D, F sharp A, Cubase wants to automatically put in the lower D bass automatically. Okay, so if you want the chord pads to not automatically put like a lower voice, so when you go to the chord pads here, so let me just select just a quick instrument here. All right, so one of the things is, if you want it to be independent, you might want to just click on the AV, but when we go to our chords, we'll see, or in the player modes rather, so click here, then you could go to your chord voicing style, and if you want it to be custom, you could say, okay, I don't want to add the root note, or I want only triads. So now as I play this particular chord, so check out like the different chord voicing styles, and you could go to custom here and just say, triads, and you could also on the player style, you could just say, okay, playing chords. And if you wanted to filter notes, you could also do it there. But check out the piano player, guitar player, go to custom, and you could just say I want complex chords, or I want very simple chords. The lowest note that I want in a range is C2. So now if I come over here, we say let's make that C2. You could have different chord voicings right there. Okay, I think we covered that one already. All right, covered that one. All right, so let's go back to see if we have more live questions. Thanks for all the great questions that people have mailed in advance. All right, we see Gareth joining from Bilbao, Spain. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're well. All right, so we see from TrackQuest Music in Hallion 7, I have like 6 F9 instruments which load up and can be used. Very cool, but I can only access them through the browser tab any other way. So I'm not sure what you mean by F9 instruments. So is it an actual, so when we go to open up, let's say Hallion, so we go to an instrument track here. So let's say if we're here at advanced, so I'm not sure if you're opening the instruments from instruments here, or if you're building the instruments, or if you have just like, a particular sound. So let's say if we come here to, if you drag an audio file over, we could just play. So if if it's just audio files that are over, then once you drag them over, you would need to save the preset, and then it would end up under the user presets instead of the factory presets. But let me know what you mean by F9 instruments. But if it's going to be just like WAV files that you drag in, or if you created an instrument using the various forms of synthesis, you could save that as a preset, and then you shouldn't have to load them all up individually. But if you could clarify that would be helpful. All right. All right, so we see Beverly Beatty just says, thanks, Greg. She had mailed in some questions. Glad you made it back in time. Hope you had a good time getting your coffee. All right. See, Gareth is also confused with F9 if it's an F9 chord. Okay, so we see maybe, so it says, yes, instruments, snares, kicks, sounds, trying to open them from the side, one shows up. My snare patch errors don't show up, only through the browser can I find them. So, anywhere, so, if you're just kind of, looking through your browser here, so I'm not sure if it's, just like if I wanted to come over here, let's say, okay, I was browsing and I want to, think I have like a project here, so if I wanted to come over here, so let's say I'm looking for audio, then I could say, okay, I want this kick. So let's, if I was building a particular one, I could, so I'm not sure if it's all samples or just different sounds, but let's say if I come over to, So I want my kick just on this particular key, and I want it a snare, like let's say my snare bottom on D1. We could just, and if we wanted to take a number of snares that were stacked, I could come here and say, okay, now I want all these snares to be layered on this one particular key. So we could, just come over here and save that as a preset to recall. So, all right. All right, so we see F9 sound pack. So if they're individual samples, you're going to have to, because if the company didn't provide like the programming, just simply come over and, drag those in, and then you could just come over here, save a preset. So say April 3rd, 2026. And then you could recall that preset with all those particular, your F9 samples in there. So I'm not familiar with F9 sound packs, unfortunately. All right, wonderful to see George on. It says the update was a pleasant surprise yesterday, an early Easter egg. May everyone have a happy and peaceful Easter. Thanks for joining us, George. Hope you're well. All right, so we see Staple Winters just asking, somehow my monitoring stopped output on both left and right channels. I'm duncing out over here. My studio setup shows output is left only since 14 Pro to 15. So check, if you're trying to like audition sounds, probably what I would always recommend is if you go to your audio connections, is for your outputs to have like a stereo out. If you're working in stereo, have a stereo out defined. And go to your control room, and from the control room, define a monitor here. So you can right click and add a monitor, and make sure in a control room that you have like your routing for your audio interface set directly there. All right, you see TrackQuest Music, wishing me a happy Easter. Looking forward to it. It's my son's birthday day after, so looking forward to that as well. Yeah, so we see from TrackQuest Music, just says, shouldn't have said sound packs, they make amazing instruments for all kinds of DAWs. So, yeah, but you could just, if it's the audio files, and you could just kind of drag them over. All right, so we see, can we get an updated file browser? Searching and auditioning sounds is horrible. I really want to use Cubase as my main DAW. That's the only thing holding me back. So I think it's pretty straightforward. So let's say if I'm just here, we could just say, okay, so we could have, let's say I just want to come over here. If we're looking through different folders, I could say, okay, let's get to our file browser. We could have, as we come over here, let's go to this computer. Let's get to documents. So if I want to just come over and be able to audition different, so let's just choose. All right, so come over here to my project. So now I want to go through my audio files. I can just not all these files start right at the we could also just go home. We could have, if you want to go to your favorites. So let's say, okay, I have one shots in here. So I want to be able to, I could audition in tempo. I could audition not in tempo. I could audition at half speed, 2 times speed, so we could just kind of come directly over here. So most people find it pretty fast to be able to audition through your sound. So you know, if you haven't really used Media Bay, I think you could get you could definitely be very fast. Lots of people browse through tens of thousands of samples. Okay. All right, so you see Sable Winters. It says, okay, thanks, and their touch to control room. I'll set that up. So, yeah, they'll probably do the trick for you, Sable. All right, we'll see if there's more questions that sneak in. I think we are at the end of questions so far, but we'll see if there's, wait in our minute, see if other questions come in. Thanks, everyone, for all the great questions. Hope that everyone's learned a new tip or trick. And if you have, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And we usually, if you're new to the live streams, we usually do these on Tuesdays and Fridays. You could always go to cubaseindex.com to search for topics. We've been doing it for over 6 years now, since COVID, and we're still doing it. And I want to thank Steinberg always for allowing us to do this and have this as a resource available to users and not monetizing it and putting a zillion ads in it. So, see if there's other questions come in. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. You know, it's Good Friday. We want everyone, if you're celebrating Easter, to have a wonderful Easter. All right, we see Michael Graybill just saying take care to everyone. Give it another minute or so, see if there's other topics come in. All right, just a little bit longer. See Graham Witcher, just a kind word, saying the best live stream and web. Thank you very much. Thanks for the kind word, Sable. All right, so with that, I think we are out of questions. I want everyone, please stay safe and healthy. If you're celebrating Easter, have a wonderful Easter celebration with your loved ones and family. And we'll be back on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And with that, we will... all right, so quick question just kind of came in. It says, question for the buses, which is better, stereo combined panner or balanced panner for stereo? So a lot of times when people are doing, I think either is fine. So a lot of times people, when they're using buses, may not be doing proactive panning on the bus. So a lot of times the bus is kind of more of a destination, and the panning would go on the individual track. If for some reason, there's, it's not always a fixed rule or fixed way of working. If you needed to, if you needed to have independent left and right panning, then I would do, the combined panner, so that when we have a bus, but I think most of the time people aren't like really doing independent left and right panning on a bus. So, and also just want to remind people that if you haven't gotten Cubase 15 yet, there is the sale going on. So take advantage of the discount. It's 30% off. And I think with that, we are out of questions. Again, thank you so much, and we'll be back on Tuesday. Everyone have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you back. Take care. Goodbye.